Today, we're diving into a story that feels less like a history lesson and more like a full-blown Shakespearean tragedy. It's the story of the Emperor Nero, a ruler who kicked off his reign with so much promise, only to end it as one of history's most infamous villains. And we're going to piece it all together through the eyes of the ancient historians who basically wrote the script: Tacitus, Suetonius, and Cassius Dio.
And really, this is the question that just hangs over his entire story. He wasn't born a tyrant, at least not in the eyes of his people. So what on earth happened? Was it a slow, creeping corruption of power? Was there a latent madness just waiting to get out? Or was it something else entirely? Well, the ancient sources, they have their theories, and let me tell you, they are dramatic.
This quote, it just sets the stage perfectly. These were his famous last words as he was dying. Think about that for a second. Not the words of a leader or a general, but of an artist. It tells you so much about how he saw himself, and it's absolutely key to understanding the incredible story we're about to unfold. Okay, so let's rewind, because it wasn't always fire and fury. When a young Nero came to power back in 54 AD, he had this kind of dream team guiding him: the brilliant philosopher Seneca and the no-nonsense Praetorian prefect Burrus. For a while there, Rome actually breathed a huge sigh of relief. This period was so good, so full of hope, it was later nicknamed a Golden Age. And when you look at his early policies, man, it really looks like a blueprint for a perfect emperor. According to both Tacitus and Suetonius, you've got tax cuts, financial support for struggling senators, and a promise to keep his own wallet separate from the state's. He even made a big deal about ruling just like the legendary Augustus. For those first 5 years, it really seemed like he was the real deal. And get this moment right here perfectly captures the image he was putting out there. This isn't the arrogant tyrant we all think of. Suetonius tells us about this moment of incredible humility, a young emperor who seemed genuinely humbled by his new job. This is the guy Rome thought it was getting, a far, far cry from the man he would become. For the ancient historians, there was a very clear moment when the mask slipped, a line that was crossed, when that golden age officially ended and the terror began. And it all centered on one horrific act: the murder of his own mother, the powerful, ambitious, and frankly terrifying Agrippina the Younger. The plot, as Tacitus and Suetonius tell it, is like something out of a bizarre, dark comedy of errors. First, he tries to poison her 3 times. Nope, she'd been taking antidotes. Okay, plan B, a rigged ceiling in her bedroom designed to collapse on her. That didn't work either. Someone tipped her off. So he moves on to his masterpiece, a specially designed boat that would fall apart at sea. But she survives that too. She just swims to shore. At that point, a panicked Nero drops all pretense and just sends assassins to her house to finish the job. And this is where Tacitus gives us this absolutely chilling final scene. Agrippina, defiant right to the very end, supposedly pointed to her own womb, the very part of her that gave Nero life, and told the soldier to strike her there. With this single act of matricide in 59 AD, the sources tell us Nero's fate was sealed. His descent into madness had begun. With his mother out of the picture, Nero's true obsessions took center stage. Literally. You see, one of the most scandalous things about his reign, at least for the Roman elites, wasn't just his cruelty. It was his deep, burning desire to be a public performer. For an emperor, this was completely unthinkable, a total degradation of his office. He sang, he played the lyre, he raced chariots. Suetonius tells us he was so into it that he actually went on tour in Greece to compete in their famous musical contests. And you better believe you had to clap. Audiences were literally forced to sit through his hours-long performances, with the gates locked so no one could leave. His political rivals even started using it against him, with one famously calling him a bad lyre player, which to the artist emperor was probably the deepest insult imaginable. But all this obsession with his art, it came at a price. His spending on festivals and palaces was draining the treasury, and his neglect of actual government work was creating a power vacuum. This whole situation set the stage for the paranoia and disaster that would define the rest of his reign. And 2 events really stand out: the Great Fire of Rome and the massive conspiracy that almost took him down. So in 64 AD, a huge fire absolutely devastates Rome. Now, did Nero start it? The sources disagree.
Tacitus is a bit more careful. He says it's uncertain if it was an accident or Nero's fault, but he confirms that a devastating rumor spread like wildfire, that Nero was on his private stage singing about the fall of Troy while watching his own city burn. Suetonius, on the other hand, just comes right out and says Nero did it on purpose to clear land for a new palace. Either way, the story stuck. Nero fiddled while Rome burned.
And the scale of this thing was just immense. 10 of Rome's 14 districts were gutted. To shift the blame, Nero needed a scapegoat, and he found one in the Christians, who were a small and widely misunderstood group at the time. Then, on the cleared-out land, he started building his gigantic over-the-top palace, the Domus Aureor, or Golden House, which, as you can imagine, only made people even angrier.
All of this simmering hatred finally boiled over in 65 AD. A huge plot to assassinate him was uncovered, known as the Pisonian Conspiracy. We're talking senators, knights, even the commander of his own bodyguard. It was a massive wake-up call that the Roman elite had finally had enough.
What's amazing about this plot is who was involved. It was a huge cross-section of Roman society. Nero's old tutor, Seneca, got caught up in it and was forced to commit suicide. The purge that followed also took out other important figures Nero distrusted, like the Stoic senator Thrasea and the great general Corbulo. But the historian Tacitus saves his highest praise for a freedwoman named Epicharis. Under horrific torture, she refused to name anyone, which was a stark contrast to the so-called noble senators who quickly sold each other out to save their own skins. The plot failed, but it showed just how deep the opposition to Nero really was.
The failed plot might have bought Nero a few more years, but the writing was on the wall. His support had completely crumbled, and when the end finally came, it came fast. The provinces, fed up with his taxes and his total neglect, started to revolt, and this time the rebellion was unstoppable.
It all just came apart in a matter of months. In March of 68 AD, the governor of Gaul revolts. A month later, the governor of Spain joins in, and his troops declare him emperor. By June, the very same Senate that used to praise him had declared Nero an enemy of the state. It was over.
And the final scene of his life is just, well, it's pathetic. The master of Rome, the performer who saw the world as his audience, was now a fugitive. Suetonius paints this vivid picture of his last hours, hiding in a villa, barefoot, in a shabby disguise, literally trembling as he heard the horses of the soldiers coming to arrest him.
As he ordered a grave to be dug for him, he just kept weeping and repeating over and over, "What an artist perishes with me." Even at the very end, his entire identity was wrapped up in his art. With the help of his secretary, he finally plunged a dagger into his own throat, ending his reign and the entire Julio-Claudian dynasty that had started with Augustus. And so, we're left with this question. Was he a misunderstood artist, a depraved tyrant, or maybe, just maybe, a victim of biased history? You have to remember, the historians writing about him were doing so under new dynasties that had every reason to paint him as the ultimate monster to justify their own power. They give us this compelling story of a good kid corrupted by power, an artist who saw the world as his personal stage. Whether he was truly that monster or just a complex figure vilified by his enemies, the tragedy they wrote for him remains one of the most fascinating in all of history.